Hey there, I'm Smorgastorta. Smorgastorta. I can't pronounce it. I'm not Swedish, I just really like sandwich cakes. It takes the most delicious things and puts them together. A sandwich and a cake. Sandwich cake. It's so wonderful.
That is good for you.
The Little Prince was just released on Netflix after an abruptly cancelled American release by distributor Paramount Pictures, just a week before its planned release on March 18th of 2016. Fortunately, I live in Canada, and I got to see it around that time on its Canadian release. I've also had the luck to see the movie a couple of more times. Because I noticed that each repeated viewing brought something new to the surface, I felt really inclined to make an in-depth analysis of the film. I know what you might be thinking. What? This is a kids movie. But hold your horses, mate. Kids movies can be great movies. Just enjoy the video. The movie is adapted loosely from a classic 1940s French book with the same title, written by poet and pioneering aviator Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. The book recounts the tale of a pilot who crash lands in the Sahara Desert and meets a boy who says he's from another planet. Rather than making a straight adaptation of the book, director Mark Osborne's approach to the film was to mirror his own experiences with the book. He added a framing story as a way to show the book affecting someone's life. While the portions of the book are done in stop motion, the portions of the framing device are done in Pixar-esque CG animation. Osborne cited the texture choice as a commentary on the marketplace. CG movies make money, and stop-motion movies don't make money. So let stop-motion represent creativity and originality and the imagination in childhood. And let CG represent the cold reality that is out there. With the title of the movie as The Little Prince, you'd probably expect the focus of the movie to be on the book. And with the CG animation, it's also very easy to shelve this movie among the 100,000 other CG animated children's movies, particularly animated features from Disney/Pixar or DreamWorks. Basically, the movie has two very large preconceptions to fit/overcome before people even see it. Would preconceptions mar what people thought of the movie, or was it that preconceptions led people to think the movie was better than it was? I found it so unfortunate that the CG portions of the movie were so dismissed, because the art direction for the entire movie is so commendable. Could it even be that this movie was so different from other animated films that people just didn't know what to think of it? To better go through this video, I'm going to try to split the film into 3 acts. I'm also going to spoil the entire movie, like starting right now really, so if you're planning on experiencing book or movie Little Prince yourself, I highly recommend you go do that first and then come back. And if you're American and have Netflix, you can go do that right now.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Let's say Act 1 is the introduction of our characters and the introduction of our characters to each other. Act 2 is the development of the little girl's friendship with a plane guy, and the third act is after the ambulance scene.
Back straight.
As the movie begins, there are some important things from the introductory shot of 2 characters. They're in sync as though the girl is being molded into a little version of her mom. We see more examples of this later in the film. There are also 2 other families sitting quietly next to them. When the door to the interview opens, we see another 3-person family. When they actually enter the interview, there is an empty seat next to the girl's mother, all suggestions that someone is missing from the picture. We also see in the first few moments that the little girl doesn't have a perfect set of teeth, which actually also connects it to the idea of her missing father. Throughout the film, her dad is never seen or outright discussed, even though we see many visual suggestions that he is missing from her life. Almost as if the film suppresses the topic as the characters do. Like the broken teeth is not something seen on the surface. It suggests that she's broken inside, both literally and figuratively. What's also important is that in the very first scene we see the teeth, we also see that her mother wants her to hide them.
Show your teeth. No, not too much.
Another element in both their character designs is that they have their hair tied back most of the time.
017.
With Faye. Thank you.
After the interview is flubbed, the mother decides to move them into the neighborhood to get into the school instead. The mother mentions miracles here.
Neighborhood identified? Check. If by some miracle we can find a house in the neighborhood we can afford, they have to take you.
One of the very first lines of the movie also include the word miraculous.
Something miraculous happened.
The little family manages to move into a house in a neighborhood that looks like the same hundreds of houses. More phrases from the radio can be heard while they're driving in.
Serious and sensible man.
The lines on the radio are lifted from the book, but they also play some extra credits in the film. Right as the little girl and the mother are moving into their new neighborhood, we hear the line, "No one is satisfied where he is." While the radio claims to be talking about important things, it becomes a background drone throughout the movie that none of the characters seem to be paying attention to. It's briefly shown twice that the little girl is holding a box in her seat. This indicates the contents are fragile, but it's also a sign that they're important to her as she's holding them in her lap rather than packaging them with everything else.
There are also hundreds of others.
Right after this, the radio says, "There are also hundreds of others," before fading back into obscurity. Like the shots of the minimalistic, identical neighborhood, there's a sense of a lack of individuality. The snow globes also work as yet another suppressed mention of her father. The first part of the aviator's house we see is when the kite drifts into view through their windshield. Many of the symbols tied to the aviator, like the kite, are related to the idea of flight. Flight often conveys the idea of freedom, and all the imagery of flight in the film are strongly connected to the aviator.
Just keep reminding yourself, that house made this house available, and made your future possible.
As the old man himself represents freedom for our main character, it makes sense that he would be a pilot. On the other hand, the mother chases the birds off as soon as she sees them. Another example of their contrast is that there are a lot of flowers in the aviator's backyard, while the girl's environment is somewhat barren. When the aviator sends the mother a little flower, the mother also discards them pretty much immediately. This shot also provides an example of the detailed cinematography in the movie. We see the reflection of the kite on their windshield first, rather than seeing the kite itself. These shots are placed to show happenings without having characters or narration tell. Big elements of the film are the color and lighting, communicating what is being seen literally, i.e. reflective surfaces that are able to show us two things at once, or metaphorically to show symbolism or an emotional state. It's fitting that the film brings up multiple mentions of fate, as in a way fate is the opposite of the micromanagement of the little girl's life.
The day of the week of the month of the year of your life, everything.
We get a sense of the pressure the girl is put under to succeed, both when she failed and when the sobbing couple exited. But like the environment itself, the movie keeps it very repressed. One of the symbols of the girl's mother are clocks, notably the wristwatch that she's wearing. The mother designed an extensive life plan, which is essentially a giant clock that dictates what the little girl should do for every hour of every day. In addition to the clocks on the life plan and the life plan itself, there's a clock in her dining room and by their bedsides. And both of them have a watch strapped to their wrist at all times.
You are going to make a wonderful grown-up.
Thank you, Mom.
After this, the mother leaves her work.
I wish I could stay, sweetie.
An important part of the film is also how shapes play a role in conveying meaning. Straight away when you enter this house is very symmetrical and geometrically perfect. What's very prominent is the use of square shapes everywhere. The aviator accidentally bores a huge hole through their house and the little girl is given a jar of pennies as compensation. When the aviator gives her a page of the Little Prince in the form of an airplane, we see more circle shapes on the page itself. First thing the aviator ever gave her were the circular pennies. As the film progresses and the girl gets more involved with the aviator, more contrasting circular shapes appear, as well as many circle frame shots. breaking away from the girl's very rigid and controlled environment. Earlier, I mentioned how the lighting and color play big parts in the film. From the start of the movie, the colors are muted and cold to represent the restraint of her home life. In contrast, we have warmer colors in the aviator's house. When the little girl pricks her finger rolling the pennies, we see the first quick splash of deep red. We enter the pages and the colors of the little prince are much warmer than the girl's environment. The book starts out as a traditional 2D animation. After entering the page visually is a flat paper craft animation, and eventually the animation becomes a more dimensional stop motion. The animation of the little prince gradually becomes more dimensional as we progress, symbolizing the girl's growing investment in the story. An important color in the stop-motion animation is the color white. White commonly represents purity and innocence. However, the film's art direction paid attention to white because when asked what colors people associate with the little prince, it will be white because of the white pages of the book.
If you please, draw me a sheep.
A shade of bright green also appears when the little prince appears for the first time. Later, the little girl enters the aviator's backyard, and it's the first time that we see so much bright green in the movie. The little prince is also wearing a yellow scarf while the aviator wears a yellow jumpsuit, while the other adults and the little girl tend to wear colder colors. The girl then enters into the old aviator's house. The plane, a big part of both stories, is a bright red. Despite it being so much more filled with stuff than the girl's house, there is everything but clocks, suggesting that the aviator is unconcerned with the passage of time. When they meet each other, the aviator immediately has a small accident in his house.
Are you okay?
Oh, I'm fine. This happens sometimes.
Right after, they go to the roof to see the sunset. Both of these things are indications that things won't last very early on in the film. The aviator then continues his story and introduces the rose. Another glass case appears like the glass of the snow globe seen earlier. As the camera follows the characters drifting apart to finally have their backs to each other, the prince leaves his rose with the glass case on.
He left her? All alone?
Let's face it. You're gonna be all alone out there. All alone.
It's fitting that we associate the globes with both her father's gifts and the rose.